Good evening, Abafazi and gentlemen.
Abafazi and Thato.
And Thato is a gentleman, almost recognize him.
Lebo says I'm worse. So.
You're worse. How are you guys this evening?
We're good.
Why are you already like sighing already? Are you already feeling the depth or the weight of our title? It's Culture of Slavery. Who? Okay, no, please don't laugh. No, seriously, this is a serious topic.
It's very serious.
We're talking about cultural slavery in 2014. Who owns and tells our stories? This is something that, I mean, for us as a media company that was started because of the lack of representation of and the misrepresentation of black people, black women in South Africa. This is obviously a topic that's very dear to us. And we started with a case study, a very interesting experience that we had in the Wits Arts Museum's doing hair and art exhibition that was held over the last, I think, 2 months. It started in August, ending, I think, in 2 weeks' time, or next week.
Tomorrow, on the 2nd.
Yeah. And that was quite an interesting experience. We wrote an article about it. We were quite critical. And I actually just read what the first aspect of our objection to it was, because I think for me, my first alarm bell went when I saw some of the articles that were written before the opening of it, and it said, this is from the head curator, Professor Anitra Nettleton, who then made the statement that Europeans have been playing with their hair for over millennia, as have Africans, and there's no reason why they should not all continue to do so. The blonde-haired black soccer stars in the Premier League are not doing anything that is ... out of line. So for me, that said that number one, it's problematic that if the subject matter is about African hair, that means predominantly black hair. We have a curator who's not black. She's telling my story as a white woman, and something that we see all the time. And at that, when she told the story, she didn't get the nuance. She didn't understand that this is something that is so emotional for a lot of us as black people. It's not just a vacuum that we decide to do our hair. You've sort of just missed a lot of the nuance that goes into black hair. So I don't know I know Lebo didn't go to the exhibition, but you saw a lot of the responses. And then we're going to Millie, we actually did the opening talk of the exhibition. I just want to start with you, just here. What are some of the responses that you got or saw on Twitter about the exhibition?
The responses that I saw were quite negative. People felt the exact same issue that you're raising, that they felt othered, they felt like it was white people talking about black people yet again. They felt that the treatment was very superficial as well, in some ways. I haven't seen it, so you know, I can't confirm, deny, what. What I did see was a copy of Millie's speech that was posted on social media, which was absolutely brilliant, you know. And what I did see was a lot of excitement in the build-up to the exhibition.
You were excited.
Yeah, it looked like something that was going to be thrilling, and then it was like, I didn't go see it because of the responses, because people that I like and that I respect didn't appreciate the way that the subject matter was treated.
So it was quite interesting in that, because I remember I was there on the opening night, and Millie's speech for us was the best thing that came out of the take the compliments. It was the best thing, because it showed the nuance of just whether we're talking about the frivolous thing, banana, whatever, all the different hairstyles, but then also talking about the politics of it, and it wasn't nappy hair bashing or anything like that. It was just speaking about what are the systems that have brought us to this point in time where we're making certain decisions, where Brazilian hair is more commercially successful and that sort of thing. And that was really great. And I think that, I don't know, Millie, what was your experience of the exhibition?
Well, I was asked to do the opening address a couple of weeks before the exhibition. And of course, I'd heard about it months before, and I was very excited. I was like, I would absolutely love to, because I've already been doing research on the subject anyway, and what better way to, you know, express my findings. I'm making a film about the politics and history of African hair.
Sure.
And so, I mean, I thought what better way to express my findings and to share what, you know, and hear what other people, and of course to see this exhibition. And I didn't actually get to see the exhibition before, but I did get this catalogue.
Sure.
And I went on the day, in the morning of the exhibition, and it wasn't entirely complete. I saw some of the parts, but I didn't see the whole thing holistically.
Sure.
And I went home and I read this catalog, which I found it really great.
And it was available on the night, this catalog?
It was available on the night, and they actually sent me a PDF, and then I went to collect the copy of this. So I was even more excited to see the exhibition, because this is quite nuanced, this is quite self-aware, and there's a lot of content that states that they understand the problematics of the othering by having an institution such as WAM, like othering blackness and black culture. But this catalog also kind of is a disclaimer, because they say that they didn't want to other African hair, so they had to include all cultures and you know, the whole human body's hair and the hair story. So that's why you have I think his name is Paul Davis, but there's an artist who made an artwork about white masculinity and the removal of hair and systems of control. And they kind of tried to spread it out. But in so doing, I think, for me, I feel like an exhibition like that can't exist without a critical analysis of African hair.
Sure, you can't. It's an exhibition on hair in Africa.
And it was, they kind of did more than they could chew.
I think so.
Yeah, in that they didn't really do the exploration and the deep analysis of the politics of African hair. And because they didn't do that, they kind of intercepted it with hair in general, and had the European view, and had, you know, a kind of whiteness's contribution to the larger hair conversation. But I think, I mean, I get I understand why they want to do it. It's a very interesting topic. It's quite topical at the moment, and I feel a lot of us, it's a gateway for a lot of us to speak about consciousness about our own politics. And it's quite an accessible tool that in your hair, the materiality of hair, everybody can talk about it. But there's such a particular context and nuance to black hair, and I feel like, you know, having 10 curators, 2 of which are black and who are in junior positions.
There were 4, as we were told. 3.
They were told 3.
They were told it was 3. So can you just read for us just part of one of the texts that is part of the catalogue, because I think it really just speaks to the whole issue of representation quite a bit.
I mean, I highlighted a lot. There's a lot of good writing and a lot of self-awareness in this catalog. I just want to say that. I just say
there were many essays that were wrote that they had written to accompany this exhibition.
So one part, I'm going to read 3. The first one is, of particular relevance to museum displays, defining the other involves studying, displaying, and reconstructing the anthropological, biological, linguistic, racial, cultural, social, and historical characteristics of the so-called other. That which is the subject of display, of gaze, of scrutiny, of evaluation is placed both symbolically and practically in subordination to the institution that constructs the display, directs the gaze, and categorizes the observations. So before I went, having read this, I was like, okay, cool.
So you read that great part. I read the unnuanced part. So we came with very different views. Because I came just waiting to be sort of upset, because I was actually hoping to be proved wrong by the exhibition, but I wasn't. And I found a lot of other people, black people, sort of very upset by this caricaturing. You know, it's the famous, you know, that township, the barber, that sort of, you know, that piece that's now being in white homes all over South Africa and Africa. You know, it's just, we just constantly feel like we're being caricatured with it. And I just think, you know, what was quite interesting, our experience with it is that we wrote this negative or this critical review of this exhibition, and were then engaged by the museum. You know, they actually said, you know, thank you for actually taking the time to critically engage with us and critically engage the exhibition, you know, and we note the issues that you raised. Please bear in mind that, one, as it relates to the issue of representation, we did put out an open call for curators, for those to be part of the curatorial team. Second part is that the exhibition was not trying to be exhaustive, and it really was not just about black hair, it was about hair and about the art of hair. So those were the caveats, and they said, look, we're interested in having a conversation. Would you perhaps come in and we can have a discussion? So we said, okay, we will do that, because we thought that, you know, you actually took the time to respond to us. But I think, you know, part of the responses, you know, were just that, one, we actually did have some black people, and I think that's a response that a lot of us as black people here in South Africa, but we had 2, look at our one. It's issues of who is actually in ownership, who actually gets to control some of these things that represent us is really important. And also, if we're saying we need a lot more black people, and we'll discuss this right at the end, it's not good enough to just have an open call. You actually have to be a lot more deliberate. I mean, even for us as a magazine that's for black women, and knowing that we're very pro-black as well in terms of who our suppliers are, who we work with, we always go out of our way to find people who are black to work with us, and it's not as easy as just putting up an ad on Craigslist or whatever it is that you use. You actually have to go and find someone, and eventually it will become a lot easier. So I guess for us the next question is just, are we wrong, are we unfair in demanding that things that represent black people are done by black people? Thato. You've been quiet, so we need to hear.
So I think for me it is it's a matter of we are where we are now, right?
What is that?
So it's 2014. We've had generations and centuries of our stories being owned by other people, and I think there's been a lot of underestimation of how much imagery and the power of people telling their own stories themselves does for a psyche of a person. And I think that's really where I feel a lot of that conversation is missed when these scenarios keep repeating themselves, because you're disempowering us, because you're using your perspective, and it is a pervasive perspective, because really we live in a world that is according to the terms that are dictated by whiteness, right? And a very European sensibility. And so the more and more we keep changing these situations and these scenarios where we get to be at the forefront, we are then reinforcing the fact that it is okay for us to image ourselves and to project ourselves to the rest of the world, so that we can walk with the confidence, so that I don't have to feel uncomfortable wearing African print.
But what if, I think we've seen in a lot of cases, let's just use African print, where you're finding it's European labels who are using African print, and then that somehow that's where we get our affirmation, right? That because it's been done overseas, Louis Vuitton has used, whether it's the blankets or whatever, now we're actually, yes, that can walk Prada. So I think
that speaks to the heart of the problem, that why must it take Louis Vuitton first to put the Masai blankets on the Paris Fashion Week runway in order for me to feel validated, right? So if I was at the focus and at the center of doing that, saying, actually, the Masai way of living is good enough to be projected to the rest of the world, I'd be very comfortable and I'd be very confident walking out into the world and saying, this is who I am. But it is other people doing it on my behalf.
Yeah. So Lebo, you're telling us about your feelings about us owning, or the need for us to own our own content.
I think one of the biggest problems, and the reason why you have black people who move around with a sense of not being able to occupy fully our own cultures, our own language, our own aesthetics, is because we don't control a lot of the platforms that show these images of who you need to be. And we also don't, I mean, white supremacy controls like how you feed your family, you know, the clothes that you can't have this hair in corporate, you can't go to school, you can't go to work or school, you know, wearing an African fabric. If you do make that choice, then that means that you're automatically relegated to like the creative industries or something, you know. You can't.
Or you're a bit too radical in the office, and let's not promote you.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's why
we don't trust you.
We don't trust you.
You become
because you're not the right cultural fit.
Yes, cultural fit. We love that in South Africa.
Because cultural fit is code for you're not white enough.
Yes.
What is that? I've never heard of that.
What?
In corporate spaces, that's the phrase of the
yes.
of
I was
the
the
year,
best
of the
culture fit. I've got the right accent, going to the right schools. I mean, it works, right? It's easy to co-opt me and think I'm a good black, right?
Yes.
It's true. I know.
And then the betrayal is even bigger when
it's
they realize what your politics
are. How can you be this person? Like, you actually speak your own language? You other black people are always surprised, because I mean, by all means, if you look at me externally, the way I speak, it sounds very white, or it's the right kind of black accent, right? I went to private school, we go on holiday at home, we do so many of these things work, so it's very easy to feel comfortable with me. If we now, I mean, and those, it's very much about opportunity, right? So, for example, if it is the case that now you need to travel with me, you don't feel bad about traveling with Panashe. She's not going to make you, it's an equal test. Panashe's not going to make you feel uncomfortable about your white privilege, because you're like, but I mean, these guys are doing okay. You know, she worked hard. You know, it's all about meritocracy. You know, all of those kind of...
You can all eat at Woolies together.
Yes.
And go and eat at Sea Point on business trips. And
exactly. And you want, you're not
until you start talking. Until you actually start talking. Until Malema comes up.
And you say you actually like him, and then, oh...
Yes. No, they love him now. Lots of white people love Malema.
I just think it's about identifying, understanding, and destabilizing the structures of power.
Isn't it a privileged thing to say, that you can actually do that? Because I mean, for us, even think about a lot of black people on Twitter, a lot of black professionals on Twitter. They don't say what they want to say, or even many of us when we're on different platforms, we will censor ourselves because somebody owns us.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, I can claim that privilege. I do have that privilege because I don't walk into an office and clock in and clock out and say, yes, you know, so and so, I had handed this.
And that's a choice that you made.
It's a choice that I made. Yeah, and then you know, so I do have the privilege of being able to say a little bit more of expressing what my politics are than someone who has to work for someone else. But yeah, it's about destabilizing the structures of power, and it's about understanding how power works.
But that's not completely true either, because I mean, you've got major corporate retailer clients. You know what I mean? So with every time that you put your voice on the line,
I know that they're watching, they're listening. Exactly. But the thing is, the kind of deals I have with them is such that our paths never cross in those, the swords never cross in the politics space, in the political arena. So I make money through my fashion stuff and consulting through fashion stuff. So the fashion and the politics haven't really crossed paths yet. No one has come to me and said, no, but you can't say that. But I have also self-censored myself because I do know that, of course, I have, you know, particular relationships that I want to protect. I want to eat at the end of the month. But I'm freer than somebody who works at Investec, for instance. So that's you know, we can't be naive about how we look at why we, you know, do the things we do, why we kind of want to throw away our culture sometimes, why we don't understand our culture. Because we do come from a place, especially in South Africa, the entire, you know, the global north and south, brown people, black people like us.
It's by design.
It's by design. It's not. It's very intentional. Not an accident. It's not an accident. And we can't blame too much of ourselves and say, oh, you know, we're throwing away our culture, we don't know our culture. We have to understand why we don't know our culture. And then when we do, try and debunk the things that we've been told about ourselves. And for me, it's using things like hair. We can have those conversations by delving into something like hair and asking ourselves, why is it so political? That leads to, you know, it's as Lebo keeps saying, it's a gateway to conscientization and self-knowledge. And we can even use that example in what happened at the museum. We have to look at the power structures. Who was sitting? Who sits on the board of the museum? Who are the people that are in charge of curating? And if you look at them,
do they ask enough of those questions? Do you think?
Well, I think we're starting to ask enough of those questions because, for me, especially, I'm 29 and we kind of, you know, in 1994 I was 9 years old, and we kind of all just got on with it, went to these schools, you know, had our hands on our chests singing the Founders Day hymns of people that weren't our founders. And we kind of completely imbibed this culture and the white value system. And only now that some of us are older and, you know, have gone through the system of white values and assimilated completely, some of us have come out and we're like, actually, we're rejecting, we're like, hang on. A lot of us are rejecting it. Some of us were reading Fanon at age 7.
Some were reading Fanon at 7. Some were
Steve to bed. Others discovered it much later. And I felt a lot more black people who have gone through the system, the white system, are coming out saying, hold the phone. Where am I in this? Where does that? Where, you know, why have I been problematized from head to toe? My skin color, my hair, the size of my lips, what I think, you know, my politics, all of that stuff. I think that in the next 10 years, especially with the internet, it's going to help us disseminate these kinds of conversations, these kinds of thoughts. So there's a radical awakening of a self amongst larger black, amongst, you know, modern black communities, and we are starting to kind of debunk the myths we've been told about ourselves, but also speak to power. We say, I mean, this very thing that's happening here is an example of where we're going as a society. You have the ability to critically engage with that exhibition, and on your own platform say, actually, this is why I didn't like it. And I think we're at the beginning of that, and we can't stop. We have to carry on. That is how we're gonna, spread the word to other people about why things that seemingly abnormal are very abnormal.
Okay, so we're going to get we're going to conclude with looking at solutions. This is not just a wine fest, but just, I guess, in order to, and people always say, why do you need to keep on talking about these issues? Power failure. Issues is because, and again, why am I censoring myself if I don't pronounce in the right way and whatnot? Because I'm always told that you need to do this and this way in order for you to be acceptable. But anyway, the politics of how we speak is another discussion.
It would be an interesting one.
Interesting discussion, right? But just in order to be able to dismantle the systems, we really need to understand why it is that we need to do this. And for me, what about, Steve Biko often talked about the white liberal, so it's easy, if it's someone who's blatantly a racist and he or she, she, I don't know what the sex word is, goes and misrepresents us. It's easy to point out the faults. But what happens if it's a liberal white who might actually get it right, or at least it's just a liberal white who might not get it right? Where do they play? We say no, they shouldn't. Do we want them to help us?
The liberal white is just a mask. It's a persona that you can put on in the company of people of color.
Genuine.
The white liberal is never genuine. The white radical is another story. The white person who's really willing to take on their own people and who's really willing to experience the isolation that any person with conscious politics experiences within their community, within the corporate space, within the world of money, religion, politics. That person is interesting. That person is really there for you. But the person who's just there with the language, the persona, the right articulation of politics, to be able to get, they are usually there with an agenda. They're there to kind of mine, and they know very well kind of how to mine.
They're appropriate with oblivion. They don't really. Sometimes they aren't aware. Sometimes they are aware. I just think that we're getting into dangerous territory when we want to police blackness or what belongs in Africa, because things are so complex. The world is so different than when it was 300 years ago. What if an African American wants to come here and tell our stories? How are we going to police him or her?
That's why the allegiance has to be an allegiance of values. That's why it has to be about what is your agenda when you're trying to tell this particular story? Is your agenda to give people a voice? Is your agenda to make yourself and your issues vulnerable? Are you putting yourself on the table?
So I'm
because white liberals don't put themselves on the table.
I'm a white African. I love Africa, and I'm feeling on this exhibition, or
that's already a problem. You're a white African. Delve into that identity. That's like Brett Bailey. That's like the colonial story is big and it's vast, and the most.
My parents were in the struggle.
Doing what? Tell that story then. Then tell that story. Then tell your own story. Tell the story if you need to.
But our stories have been told too much.
I want to help you guys with your story.
No, that's crap. I don't need your help.
That's actually very condescending.
And also, your people have been telling my stories, and I think that's what I'm asking for.
And you made a lot of money. That's why you have the money. So maybe tell that story of how you acquired the money to be able to tell my story. That's a far more interesting story.
But I'm here now.
Give me the opportunity to tell my own story. For me, I
always say that. I'll partner with you.
So for me, I always say that.
There it is.
No, for me, I always say the one thing that white people
help your
guys. I always say the one thing that white people who live in South Africa, because now I'm getting to a point where I'm actually not calling them white South Africans anymore.
What do you call them?
White people who live in South Africa. Oof. The one thing they can do for us is to actually remove themselves from our social discourses, because they keep interrupting and distracting us.
Unless you're going to enter at the level of your personal experience. unless you're going to enter with unless you're going to enter through self-criticism, through self-analysis, through analysis of your own history, your own position, that conversation I'm actually willing to have. Because if we're going to talk about South Africa is a construction. Whatever South Africa is already includes white people. It already includes a colonial story. If we're going, you know, if we're grouping ourselves as that, I'm not for excluding white people on the basis of being white. I'm for excluding anybody on the basis of not being truthful.
Okay.
Does that include black? So what about black people who are not truthful about our own stories?
They're also problematic.
They are problematic. I feel that we as young revolutionaries, as young Africans who are self-aware and conscious of how our world is run, we need to adopt a two-strand approach to how we actually address these, you know, this mire that we find ourselves in, these problems. And first of all, we need to kind of organize. We need to find each other. We need to know who each other are. We need to organize ourselves. Some of us have got to be the reactors to these things. Some of us have got to be the Black Afri-Forum that is constantly like, we see you saying this, we don't approve of that. The reactors, accountability, the people that are visible, that are saying this Black force does exist, you can't get away with saying such things. Do you know what I mean? But the others have got to sit down and work. We need to we need to disengage. We can't all be reactors. We can't all be, you know, reacting to articles on Facebook or what people are saying. Because when are we going to be writing our stories? When are we going to be writing our feminist views? When are we going to be writing our I write what I like? In our generation, we need to you know, divide our attention. We can't all be doing the same thing. And we need to archive what we're doing, what we're saying, so that, you know, we can produce some work, we can disseminate the information easier, and so that we don't always appear as these wild, angry radicals. Yes, that there's many reasons to be angry, but it doesn't necessarily get us many places when we're constantly put in the same position by power, which disengages. The minute, you know, you have your crazy political hairstyle, or the minute you actually come up with your politics, then they don't engage you. We need to think of multiple ways to address these problems, and I think this is one of them. Having this kind of discussion, I'm sure you got a lot of comments, I'm sure you got a lot of feedback, but this is the first step. We're archiving this conversation. This is the first step to we were here, we heard this, and this is us leaving our mark, and kind of also, you know, a stamp to rejecting what we know.
And that's so important. I think one thing that, I mean, growing up, I was that person people always said, why are you always talking about race? Why are you so radical? Why are you so, can't you just, you know, can't you just be? Can't you just, why do you always have to, you know? And I think that, you know, with that Toni Morrison quote about just, you know, that racism is a distraction, right? I think it was funny.
I love that quote.
It was just so beautiful because it's just, what would I have been doing had I not been talking about race? And even with Vanguard, it's just, the things that we always think about is just, what are the conversations? So they are the conversations that we have that are very reactive, but we also think about what are the conversations that we would have had it not been for whiteness, had it not been for the fact that I'm constantly defending myself. And I think, you know, with and I don't know how you guys feel about just, again, using Toni Morrison, the concept of not privileging white voices and removing yourself. Because I think with us, what we do sometimes, we find we can write an entire article about the Oscar trial without ever mentioning Oscar Pistorius. We can write about Heritage Day without ever mentioning Young Bride.
I think for me, that was a very interesting exercise to go through, because I wrote a piece about the legal system and Judge Thokozile Masipa, right? And I was very intentional about writing about the case, but not mentioning Oscar's name wherever in that article.
Wow!
Right? Because for me, what was important was to consistently and continuously privilege Judge Thokozile Masipa.
Because she had a lot of power in that story.
She had a lot of power in that story,
but
she became a side participant because of fine for who Oscar is, but just in terms of the politics around that entire case, right?
Just with this panel, the point is saying that it can't be again that just because they don't want to have the panel with us, that we are not going to do anything. We need to be setting our own agendas and not just being reactive. So, fine, we are making lemons or lemonade out of lemons and do our own thing.
But I don't know, it's just, for me, it's just like a lot of us are still held hostage. You know,
How so?
Like a lot of us are still held hostage by these systems that we live within. So for me, it's just like, it's important that people actually do have spaces where they can say something, because you just let it, just the frustration of Monday to Friday having to wake up and to continuously be erased from your existence because you need to retrofit yourself into someone else's terms, right? Just at least there needs to be an outlet where you're like, actually,
I'm not crazy.
You know, I just like
the outlet.
At least just one day of the week, if it's on Sundays when Black Twitter usually goes crazy, let it be on Sunday, you know. But it's just like the spaces are important because the more of us are actually engaged in these conversations, the more a community of people starts to be built, where then we can actually tap into networks.
Like this.
So for me, we will eventually need to work with someone who is not completely out of the system, but they are willing to engage with us, so they might have the resources that we need, which we will not necessarily get from a closed community of people who are hard in.
Are you saying that the radicals don't have money?
The radicals don't have money because money, you know, you get money from being in the capitalist system, right? And you need to be doing the right things in order for you to access the capital.
I keep dreaming of that benefactor who's got radical politics, who wants to fund radical projects but doesn't necessarily want their name attached. You know, who's tired
all of
that
us,
crap.
all of us. For me, I'm just like sometimes it's just like why can't I just find someone who will marry me and then let me go off and do my own things?
And just fund.
Just fund my lifestyle and my interests.
Fund your consciousness.
Go, baby, be nice. Go do your things.
Go and be.
Right?
I think what you're saying is there's something very valid in having opportunities to be able to vent, because naming is active. Naming is creative.
And it's a risk.
And a lot of these problems are so layered and so nuanced. They're interwoven like tapestry. So you pull apart a thread and you've got to keep pulling to dismantle the whole thing.